The US has a very rigid two-party state, worse even than the UK's. Independents and small party candidates rarely win seats in high office, though they do often compete at presidential elections, like the one happening this November. Now, US Democratic Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has recently been campaigning very hard for Democratic Party pick Kamala Harris. And she's somewhat tarnished her progressive reputation as a result. After all, the once radical AOC is now asking her supporters to vote for someone who has committed to carry on enabling Israel's assault on Gaza, pledging unequivocal and unwavering support for Israel's right to defend itself. Leader of the US Green Party, Jill Stein, on the other hand, has repeatedly called for an arms embargo on Israel to end the assault on Gaza, a proposition that's attractive for voters who, want to end the genocide. And in what's set to be a tight race, the last thing the Democrats need is a split in the vote. In a recent Instagram post, AOC received the question, "How do I tell my friends who are Jill Stein voters they are wasting their time and effort?" Here's how AOC answered.
You are the leader of your party. And if you run for years and years and years and years and years in a row, and your party has not grown, and you don't add city council seats, and you don't add down ballot candidates, and you don't add state electeds, that's bad leadership. And that to me is what's upsetting. Because if you have been your party's nominee for 12 years in a row, 4 years ago and 4 years before that and 4 years before that, and you cannot grow your movement pretty much at all, and can't pursue any successful strategy, and all you do is show up once every 4 years to speak to people who are justifiably pissed off, but you're just showing up once every 4 years to do that, you're not serious. You're not, to me, it does not read as authentic. It reads as predatory. I'm sorry. I'm just saying it.
Bear with me. I actually agree with AOC there in principle. On a completely level playing field, it does seem to me to be pretty predatory for a political party to just kind of turn up and try to harness people's anger without having built a base on any kind of matters of principle. And I mean, I'm looking at you, Reform UK. But context here is everything. And genocide isn't just ordinary political anger. It's moral horror. It's being absolutely appalled by things unfolding in front of your eyes. And in those circumstances, people are naturally driven to do whatever it takes to stop that kind of crime continuing. And if that means abandoning the leader that's been pre-selected for you as a progressive voter, then so be it. But it's also worth asking, if you're a small party in the US, is the playing field anywhere near level? Jill Stein has now posted this reply to AOC's criticism.
I just wanted to thank AOC Pelosi so very much for her very authentic concern about growing green power. Clearly, AOC is the attack dog du jour, and the Democrats are running scared, and they should be, because who wants to support a genocide? Who wants to vote for a genocide? And if there's anything that's predatory here, it's saying that your candidate is working tirelessly for a ceasefire when actually they are actively funding and arming genocide and actually refusing to even consider an arms embargo, which would bring the genocide to a screeching halt. AOC, who's supposed to be in leadership of the Democratic Party, it's amazing if she doesn't know about the anti-democratic tactics and strategies that the Democratic Party uses to crush and silence political opposition. They've been hiring an army of lawyers to throw competitors like me off the ballot. They've been hiring infiltrators and saboteurs and publicly posting job advertisements for those positions. They've been hijacking our public funding in order to keep us off the ballot. And they actually impersonated the Greens to throw us off the ballot in 22 in the Senate race for North Carolina, for example. How is that not fraud and election interference?
AOC Pelosi, how do you even begin to recover? And thank you for your very authentic concern. It's worth pointing out that the Green Party has had important effects on previous presidential elections. In the 2000 presidential election, Ralph Nader won 2.7% of the popular vote. He was later blamed for spoiling the election for the Democrats, meaning that George W. Bush ultimately won the presidency in an extremely tight race. Helena, I think you told me on a previous show you've been a keen follower of AOC's career. The point of small parties like the US Greens is often to steer policy in a tight two-party system. So, on your interpretation, do AOC's comments about Stein suggest they're succeeding?
You absolutely should use third parties to try and steer policy, especially in very tight two-party systems. But unfortunately, I have to agree with AOC. This doesn't come by just running a presidential campaign every 4 years and forgetting to base build, forgetting to run in all different parts of your country and all different levels of legislature to try and make sure you build that base to affect policy everywhere that you can. I have always been some bit of admirer of the United States Green Party, from Ralph Nader to Howie Hawkins for quite a long time. I think Ralph Nader was an incredibly admirable politician, somebody who definitely speaks from his heart, and somebody who has always challenged the monopoly of US party politics. And his campaign, whilst in retrospect, he wishes that he had run for the Democratic Party in the year 2000, it was clearly something that came from the heart, something that he wanted to personally do to be able to try and, again, build a base for the future. What's happened to the Green support since 2000, since Ralph Nader? It's only gone down because they took what was a very large intervention in politics for a third party for a very, very long time, since Ross Perot, and they didn't turn it into local politics, didn't turn it into a way of trying to bring more people in. And that's only decreased since. It just shows you, I don't like Jill Stein. I don't like her very much at all, really. It takes a certain kind of person to want to sit at dinner tables with Vladimir Putin. This man, whilst you can have any opinion on the war in Ukraine, I don't think anybody can have an opinion on that man very specifically, unless the other one complete derision after for Chechnya and things like that. I wouldn't want to be in the same room as him, let alone sat on the same table to celebrate the anniversary of Russia Today. And of course, I don't think Jill Stein has particularly palatable political positions on plenty of other things, weird things like getting computers out of schools and children not being exposed to Wi-Fi signals, for example. She has great politics on things like the green transition, on investment in a sustainable infrastructure, on Medicare for all. But when all you're doing to the public is putting this to them every 4 years, in my mind, to do essentially an electoral grift, you're not a serious political party. Like, there are plenty of Green parties, plenty of other parties around the world in loads of different countries with similar levels of radical politics, right? You may say that the Greens in the UK are quite liberal, even if they have some more left-leaning economic policies. The Green Party in Australia are much more radical than plenty of other Green parties around the world. What have they done for the last 14 years? They have been running consistently in parliamentary elections, in local elections, in Australian state elections to try and get as much power as they can to wield hard power throughout the legislature, which is where the raft of policy gets made. You do not change policy just by running every 4 years. You fight in legislatures. There are over 500,000 elected representatives across the United States. The Green Party holds 140 of them out of 500,000. And lots of these only there because they ran unopposed. That is not an electoral fighting force. This is not a way that you change policy. When you look at the people who've had the biggest effects on trying to change the Democratic Party platform in terms of their support for Israel, the uncommitted movement, who have been the biggest force in terms of showing the Democrats that they cannot have their cake and eat it when it comes to support for Israel, is the uncommitted movement. This was internal to the party. These were people within the Democratic Party who wanted them to change their position and who used their internal powers within the party to try and change that. They, in my mind, are going to be far more successful at actually changing Democratic minds than Jill Stein just popping up since the last time she was in 2016. And also, she's not as good a candidate as Howie Hawkins in my mind anyway. I enthusiastically told people to vote for Howie Hawkins if they were in blue states in 2020 because I thought he was a lot more in tune with the problems that was really facing America at the time, whilst also seeing the dangers of somebody like Trump. And he admitted as much as well. So I don't think that she's a serious candidate. I think AOC's criticisms are warranted. When it comes to AOC, though, I don't think she's in the position to make as many of those criticisms when I don't think she uses her power internally within the party as much as she could do. She doesn't. In fact, that she's been folded into the power structure as much as she has. But that doesn't mean the criticisms aren't warranted, because there are plenty of Democratic Party representatives who have been outspoken. Did Rashida Tlaib leave the Democrats? Did Ilhan Omar leave the Democratic Party? No, they are still getting elected as Democrats to try and fight the internal party system themselves. You can say AOC isn't doing enough work, and I would agree with you. I would agree with you. But she's actually an elected representative. She may not have had any particular change on this party policy. I mentioned last time she was one tabling amendments to stop funding the coup in Bolivia, right? Like she's at least trying to do things in terms of some policy because she's sitting actually as an elected representative rather than someone who pops up to do a presidential run without actually doing the work to build the base to make that a legitimate presidential run. Because splitting the votes to try and say, well, if you don't support us, then you will lose the election. If you don't try and win our votes back, you'll lose the election, is a very legitimate political strategy to try and change politics. But that doesn't work unless you actually have enough people voting for you for it to warrant people changing policy. And Jill Stein is far, far away from that because there's no base. There isn't a base. Politics is about the exercise of power. Did Jeremy Corbyn leave the Labour Party over the Iraq War? No, he stayed and he tried to change things from the inside. And whilst I have no problems with people wanting to abandon the Democrats, there are plenty of other candidates who I prefer to Jill Stein. I like Cornel West. I like Claudia de la Cruz. I may disagree with you on tactics, but at least I think they're better candidates than Jill Stein, who don't have as many kind of skeletons in their closet. But at the key part of what I'm saying here is that unless you build a base, you don't have anything. And it's just a grift as far as I'm concerned.